welcome to Mondays with Mike. We've got Mike, and I'm Bud. So we're going to be talking about NBC News and the things they report on. And personally, I think that although we have a lot to say about the news is mostly a credible source of information, and it's valuable in this era of disinformation. And we hope, via this podcast, if anybody from a news studio will hear it, it will just inspire them to be the best versions of themselves. Mike has excellent perspectives on things, and that's why we wanted to make this podcast to bring the perspective to a greater audience. So, anything to say before we proceed, Mike?
I think the news media has become stagnant and sort of relaxed in their duty to speak truth to power, that in their search for access, they've abrogated in some ways their responsibility to actually, challenge power when they have first hand access to power to challenge it. And they can do better. So that's the main reason I'm here to talk about the news.
Yeah. And in many ways, they won't have to genuflect for long if what Kristen Welker said here on Monday, January 20th, NBC News is true. So let's listen to that first segment. Hey, this is Bud editing the first podcast because iTunes apparently doesn't want us to have any third-party content. I thought that fair use meant you could publish brief clips of the news, etc., but iTunes says no. It would probably be a legal defense, but I don't want to get into that. We just want to go ahead and take advantage of the iTunes algorithm as much as we can. So instead, for the first 3 podcasts, I'm just going to read the transcripts of the of the news videos, as funny as that sounds. So this is the video that can be found as video 1 on the link of Mondays with Mike podcast episode 1. And on January 20th, Lester Holt said, and I'm joined now by Kristen Welker and Hallie Jackson. Kristen, President Trump is claiming a mandate. He's got a narrow lead in the Congress right now. How long does the honeymoon last? Kristen Welker replies, it's not going to last very long at all, Lester. In fact, he's only got about 2 years to get his big agenda items finished, and the entire political world will be focused on the midterm elections. So he wants to get his mass deportation plan up and running. That's going to require some additional funds by Congress. By one estimate, $88 billion per year just to deport 1 million people. He's also proposed a slew of tax cuts, including extending the Trump-era tax cuts as well. That's going to be a challenge. And as you say, the majorities are quite narrow, particularly in the House. The biggest thing he'll be judged on: can he bring prices down? That was the number 1 issue for voters, Lester. I guess my first question to you, Mike, do you think that's true, that Trump will essentially be a lame duck at the end of 2 years from now, that that's a real political inevitability, or whether it's just this thing that the media, by its normative actions, is sort of bringing into existence? What do you think about that?
So I think it heavily depends on the midterms, but if Republicans maintain control of the House and gain dominant control of the Senate, there's 13 seats up for grabs in this coming election cycle in 2026 that the Democrats hold. That the Republicans could potentially get. I don't know that they will, but they could over 60 if they have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate and they still maintain control of the House. Any number of things could happen that would make Donald Trump not a lame duck president. For instance, there was a bill recently introduced to lift term limits, a congressional amendment to just remove term limits altogether, with an exception for those who have served 2 consecutive terms. So it would only apply at this moment to Donald Trump. to do
Mhm.
another term for president. Will it happen? Probably not. Could it happen? Yes, which means that it's not an inevitability, right? Because there have been amendments to the Constitution that have happened. Just as after FDR, they had to amend the Constitution so you couldn't have more terms, they so could also amend the Constitution to just completely lift term limits altogether.
I would say that's a physical and social possibility. I wonder if there's more to be investigated as to whether it would be really a statistical possibility, given the number of states that would have to approve the ratification of it. But you're correct, we shouldn't write it off in terms of a physical possibility.
You're absolutely right that it's statistically improbable, if not impossible, in our current environment for it to happen. But Trump, he defies probability in some ways, right? He's the
He
only
really has,
Yeah.
yeah.
he's a once in a I don't know century president in the sense that there's only ever been one other president, right? Grover Cleveland, who was
Mhm.
elected in non-consecutive terms. There are other ways though that he could theoretically continue if he declared an emergency. He could suspend the elections if there's some kind of state of war.
I wonder what the legal means for so suspending would be, but right, we don't want to write things off in terms of physical
He's testing it.
possibilities.
Yeah, he's testing it right now for some of these deportation orders. Suspending asylum completely is because he's stated that there's an invasion of the southern border, and until the invasion of the southern border ends, they're going to suspend asylum for anyone for any
Mhm.
claims, which is
Yeah.
new. That's something that hasn't happened. So it would have to be something like that, some kind of extreme suspension or power.
But barring a repeal or an effective repeal of the presidential term lengths amendment, if he picks up seats, if they get a filibuster proof majority in the 26 election, you think he probably wouldn't then be a lame duck. But if they do badly in the elections, do you think it's likely true that then he'd be a lame duck?
Oh yeah, and it would follow historical trends, right? So usually the first midterms, the one right after the president gets elected, there's usually a huge switch in power to serve as a check on the president.
2010, 1994.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the contract with America, 2010, you're right. And so he has to keep his promise on reducing the price of food in particular. And if he doesn't, there's going to be a serious reversal
Yeah.
in who holds the seats in the House. It doesn't look good right now for food prices because of the issues with bird flu affecting the price
Mhm.
of eggs and the egg shortage, and then the effect that tariffs have on inflation. So we'll see. But yeah, no, if
Mhm.
he loses control of the House or the Senate, he's going to be a lame duck, right? Because
Right.
then they're going to be looking to figure out a way to regain power, and that means compromise.
And then Christian Welker said, and I really agreed with this, he's going to be judged on whether the prices come down. Or he's going to be judged because that's what they were saying, right? That's what the average Trump voter was talking about. They're like, look at prices, in 2020, look at prices now. And yeah, it affects people's pocketbook. It's a real consideration. Do you agree that that'll be the ultimate test, for the electorate?
Oh yeah,
Of Trump.
so people vote with their wallets, and if enough people become hungry enough, right, that especially if they try to reduce things like food stamps or nutritional benefits or any kind of access to food that people might resort to if they don't have enough money, suddenly you have a lot of very hungry people who will use politics as their outlet to vent their frustration. They'll say the price of eggs have skyrocketed, the price of everyday things like milk and meat have gone way too high. I don't like it. The way that I get heard is through politics. That was, in
Yeah.
some ways, the justification people used in this recent election for Trump getting elected. And one of the things
Mhm.
he said is, "I'll bring down the price of food, etc. It's going to be great." Well, right now, it doesn't look so great, especially with his immigration policies. If you deport a significant number of the workforce for meatpacking, for the supply chain, for farms,
That could really produce the inflation that he said that he wants to reduce.
skyrocket costs, right? Because if they don't have a plan in place immediately to replace all of these workers, any disruption, right, of a day, 2 days, 3 days, that's going to lead to huge shortages because
just-in-time manufacturing.
Yeah, the United States just doesn't have enough reserves of these foods other than cheese. There's a lot of government cheese, right? So
government cheese.
I'm not. Yeah, there's a tons of government cheese sitting in some warehouse somewhere. In theory, they could just give out a lot of cheese. I don't know that they will, but they could. There is a lot of cheese. Yeah, there's a lot of government cheese.
There sure is. We could all be living on a diet of government cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. What the heck was I gonna say? I don't know. Yeah. Oh, right. If you think about the inflation that did occur during Biden's term, the spending really increased because of COVID, and it increased because we were trying during the first Trump administration allay the suffering. But I don't know. Do you think we overdid it? Do you think the country overdid it in terms of the aid at that time, and that resulted in the inflation? You don't think so?
No, I don't think the country did enough. I think other countries did a much better job, actually, of helping people maintain sort of a stable living environment. Part of the reason we have inflation is that, in some respects, companies fired a few too many people, and some of those people didn't want to go back to work quick enough. And so what happened is that you've got this sort of problem of not enough people working in the places they need to be working, especially in the supply chain, that you had a long lag time of things being produced to things getting to the actual sellers.
Yeah.
So from beginning to end, you didn't have all the workforce you needed in the places you needed in the pipeline. And they have still some trouble with actually getting people in those jobs, truckers in particular. But there's a
labor market distortion.
Sure, and there's a whole list of issues that happen when it takes longer for something to get from where it's made to where it's sold. It's just the way it goes. But no, in terms of the government not doing enough, it lifted poverty just to throw people back into poverty by not addressing the underlying issues that lead to why poverty came back in the numbers that it did.
Mhm.
And part of that is that the United States doesn't have guaranteed jobs like they did after FBR in terms of like the New Deal or something where if you're at the very like lowest end of the labor distribution in terms of qualifications, experience, etc., you're still competing in a labor market against other people who are also competing for those same, jobs.
Mhm.
And the issue becomes that if you don't provide adequate employment for those people at the lowest end, but you remove all the support structures like the lifting of the eviction moratorium, the changes to food stamps, the huge numbers of people kicked off of Medicaid. That was a big one that happened recently, that they just kicked millions of people off of Medicaid. All of a sudden, you have this huge skyrocketing problem of people still needing help and not getting the help they need, right? And so that's where that feeling that people had during the election of, oh, the economy looks good, but I'm not feeling it, is because they were having certain benefits and certain things happening, like the increased child tax credit, the access to healthcare through Medicaid, access to a place to live through those eviction moratoriums, and rent reductions, or there were any number of things that were happening that were helping people. And when they all went away at once, right?
Yeah.
Everybody who was not feeling it felt it, and in a big way, right?
Yeah.
They felt it in their pocketbook. They felt it in the fact that they became homeless, or they got evicted, or they had the process of eviction starting. They felt it because they were getting medical treatment for any number of things and ailments, and then they lost it, or they lost medicine, or their kids lost medicine. And so I think other countries, because they have stronger social safety nets, the impact of what the government did wasn't felt as much in those other countries. But I mean, it was like across the board kicking out incumbents around the world. So it's not like the impacts were in other countries.
Yeah. There was a big swing, an anti-incumbency bias in 2024. Yeah, but to summarize what I'm hearing from you, they kind of get people on the margins kind of got the rug yanked out from under them. And it would have helped to have something of a job guarantee.
Sure.
And I'm thinking about how the labor force participation rate, like unemployment rate, those recently unemployed, that is, pretty darn low, and it has been for a long time. But we have a state where the labor force participation rate is at a rate that so low that we have not seen since the 1970s. So you think a job guarantee would be a good thing, would help people, yeah?
Sure, here's why. So the government can be an employer of last resort, not tied to market conditions, right? So the government can and has operated at a loss for a very long time. That's what the federal debt is in the trillions. Corporations are tied to private market constraints, right? They have to operate at a profit balance or they're going to go in the red and declare bankruptcy. If they can't pay their employees or they can't profit, no business. Government doesn't have to do that. So the government already employs people in huge numbers. They're just those who are incarcerated, and they're paid significantly less than the private market.
But we're not going to pay these people with a job guarantee prison wages,
No.
are we?
So that's the whole deal. You want to pay them at least the prevailing minimum wage, if not higher, right? The issue with Unicor, the government employment or group for incarcerated individuals, is that they pay prisoners significantly lower amounts for any number of different industries. If the government knows how to put people to work in various things, they can put people to work paying them, more money. If somebody doesn't have access to a job otherwise, if for whatever reason. But when you mention unemployment rate, the whole issue with looking to the unemployment rate as compared to the actual number of people who could be employed but aren't, is that the unemployment rate only looks at those who are actively looking for work, right? So when you mention the labor force participation rate, that's people who just have given up on looking, right? And so if we have some kind of option that just guarantees you work, and cities have done this on a smaller scale, so to address homelessness, they went up to homeless people and said, hey, we'll give you, decent money to go around the city and pick up trash, right? And that has helped to address homelessness in some cities because people do want to work if afforded the opportunity to do so. It's just that there's serious barriers to getting employment. And the lie that's told is that there's enough work to go around in the private employment sector. No, right? Because employers have discretion in who they hire. And if they decide not to hire someone, that's their right to do. And if someone is not able to get hired, where do they turn to? What do they do? There's no welfare, right? Because the welfare is tied to whether you can demonstrate you can get hired. What do you do?
Yeah, right.
And the Supreme Court just criminalized sleeping in public, so where do you sleep? I mean, that's...
Did they criminalize it, or did they permit the criminalization by local...
Let me rephrase that. It used to be that cities could not criminalize sleeping in public if
now
they didn't provide shelter space. Now cities can create laws and policies without needing to provide shelter space. So they can create a law that says you can't sleep on a sidewalk, you can't sleep at a tent, you can't sleep on a bench, you can't sleep in a park, and they don't have to demonstrate that they have available shelter space otherwise. That's the current sort of status quo right now with homelessness in the U.S., which means that there are criminal penalties, or at least financial penalties, like a fine. If you don't pay the fine, you can get a bench warrant. If you get a bench warrant, you can go to jail. And so that's where that whole process happened.
I bet we could find some kind of economies of scale, provide temporary homes, and some to, provide permanent homes, especially if we put them in, cheap places and where the land is cheap, and construct a bunch of them at once and maybe in sort of a prefabricated way. So, I guess moving on to our next story, this one has more to do with the media's reporting of news and word choice and accuracy of the word choice, and perhaps the creation of a sense of an ongoing crisis everywhere. Let's take a look. The following video can be found on the Mondays with Mike website, episode 1, video number 2. But for those just listening who prefer not to go to the website, here's the transcript. On January 20th, Lester Holt said, "Among the guests of the inauguration tonight, tech giants, including TikTok CEO. The Chinese-owned app back online in the U.S. despite a law to ban it after President Trump vowed to take action. Savannah Sellers is with us. Savannah, walk us through this. Savannah Sellers replies, Lester, tonight, President Trump signing an executive order with the intention of saving TikTok, and it comes after a roller coaster weekend, folks, for the app, where it went dark for just over 12 hours, coming back online with a pop-up message crediting President Trump. Now it's official. There are still open questions about the national security concerns raised by the government about the company's ties to China that led to bipartisan support for a ban. The company's CEO was seated on stage at Trump's inaugural ceremony. He was alongside a lot of other tech titans, including Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and Mark Zuckerberg. They were all seated right among and behind Trump's family members, and all notably men who have had an about face in their relationship with the president. Okay, first of all, this was characterized as a roller coaster weekend for TikTok. But in fact, one, Biden said he wasn't going to enforce the ban, and Trump said that he wanted TikTok to stay. So calling it a roller coaster, they took themselves offline. I guess the term roller coaster doesn't have a definition where I can really pin it as this is misleading. I can't really say that, but I think there's something going on here, and I don't exactly know what. Any insights on that?
Sure, it was a savvy political strategy from TikTok, right? Trump loves the media, he loves news, he loves television. What's the news talking about? What TikTok did. I think it was a roller coaster for the users of TikTok, all their 170 million users who had access to it and then immediately lost access to it. Because not only is TikTok just the app, it also has a bunch of games that people play that require TikTok to be working for them to play the game. And so if you've invested hundreds of hours in a game, right, you've collected all like the stats, levels, cosmetics, whatever, if you spent money on a game, and then you suddenly just immediately lose access to it because TikTok decided to preemptively respond to this ban by, no longer being accessible. That's a bit of a roller coaster of emotions, at least, right? You've got like a really high of your, daily use of this app that people use for many hours a day, and then it just disappears, right? And then suddenly when it comes back and they go, oh yes, Trump did it. Very savvy on TikTok's part, right? Because they're currying political favor and they're generating capital with Trump by saying, look, here's a win for you on day one of your presidency. You didn't have to do anything other than just say that you'll look into lifting our ban, right? Great. That's awesome. So it's a sort of optimistic move on the part of TikTok to lobby the Trump administration to figure out a way to get around this ban. I think something odd is going on though, because Elon Musk, I guess, was signaling that he might buy TikTok, and so it's sort of this strange. I don't even know if he can, right, due to anti-monopoly.
I was gonna say, I think it would be the first time. Well, I mean, I guess Zuckerberg owns both Facebook and Instagram, but is that a conflict of interest? Who knows?
I don't know if it's comparable, right? The number of users for TikTok is significantly more than Facebook or Instagram in terms of, well, Facebook maybe worldwide, but in terms of the United States share, there's more people on TikTok.
Yeah, and people like have a Facebook, but when they're on TikTok, they're on TikTok. It's like you watch the videos and then you interact with the videos by switching and stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so it definitely, I think, it was smart move on TikTok's part, right? Because they understand how Trump operates. But in terms of the roller coaster, I don't think it's so much a roller coaster for TikTok because they're a huge company. They're going to do what they're going to do. It's for the users, right? Of the emotional reaction of losing something that they've had as sort of a presence in their life for so long, just suddenly disappearing. And and the uncertainty, right, of knowing when if or when it will come back.
Yeah. So I guess I would have preferred that she called it a roller coaster for TikTok users.
Sure, absolutely.
Than for TikTok itself. Right. So, yeah, we got less than a minute here left, but this was a terrific discussion.
Great.
And thank you for all your perspectives, and thanks for making this happen. We'll see you next week here on Mondays with Mike.
All right.